have some equations, and whenever we have equations, we're solving for x, and to solve an equation, we undo the operations. So to undo the operations, we need an opposite. And so here we have a square. To solve for this, we're going to undo it with the opposite operation. So because it's not times, we're not going to divide. We're not dividing here to solve for x. We're going to undo the square with a square root. So here I have square root one side, and since it's an equation, so I'm undoing the square with the square root, and since we have an equation, we have to do the same to the other side. What we do to one side has to be done to the other side. That is a fundamental rule in math. Okay? Anytime you have an equation, we have to do the same thing on both sides to keep it balanced. And when we solve for x, we get x by itself here, so we get the x. We're going to get square root 14. Now, there's something that we have to be careful of, in that we're always going to get plus minus, because the square root is not exactly the perfect opposite of squares. Because if we square a negative, we get 14. If we square the positive, we get 14. So when we undo the square, we have to account for the fact that there's plus and minus. Now we're just going to, for now, just think of this as a rule. We have to do plus minus. There's a very good reason for this, and as we learn more and understand more about squares and square roots, we'll look maybe a little bit deeper into why they're plus minus. But essentially, there's a little bit of a mismatch between the square and the square root in terms of being opposite of each other. So we just have to account for that here with a plus minus. Now, I would prefer you leave this in its square root form. But if you want the decimal, it's nice to sometimes know the decimal value. So the decimal approximation, okay, this is approximately plus minus 3.7416 ... Okay, this answer here is the one we want. Okay, this is the answer. It's exact. This one here, if we're having to do some calculation, if we're solving some word problem, we may need to use that number. But this is a math number that we want in math. So taking a look at this next equation here, we want to solve for x, so we need to undo all the parts. But there's more parts than just the square. So we're going to undo the plus, and we undo plus with minus. So we're going to minus 1 from this side, minus 1 from this side. So we end up with 4x squared equals 4. We have to get rid of the times, so we're going to get rid of the times with a divide. So we end up with x squared equals 1. And then undoing the squared, we're not going to divide, we're not going to subtract. We undo squares with square roots. And we square root both sides, and we have to remember the plus minus. So we end up with x equals plus minus 1. So there's our answer. So when we undo square roots, we don't quite have to worry about the plus minus, because we don't have to worry about this x being a plus and a minus, because we can't square root minuses. And again, this is where the mismatch is. Okay, we need a plus minus one way when we undo squares, okay, because that x could be plus or minus to get us the right answer. But we don't have to worry about that with square roots. So when we solve this, we're going to undo the minus with a plus 3. So I end up with square root x equals 7. So the number, some number square rooted gives us 7. Well, 49 square rooted gives us 7. Negative 49 square root won't work. So we do not need a plus minus here. So I'm going to undo this. So I'm actually going to do the opposite now. So now thinking about undoing and solving. The opposite of square root is squared. So I square both sides. And I end up with x is equal to 49. And we do not get plus minus 49. Okay, because when we square something, we're only going to get the positive value of this when we square it. And this also reflects, if we go back, remember solving equations, we're finding the value of x, and we have to be able to plug that x back in, and if we use negative 49, that wouldn't work. Here it does work, because if we plug in root 14, we get positive 14. If I put in negative root 14, if I square a negative, I still get a positive 14. So here we're going to solve by undoing again. So again, undo plus with a minus. We're going to undo the times with a divide. So some number square rooted equals 2. Well, we can guess at that answer. The answer should be 4. To get that answer, we need to undo the square root. We're not going to times, we're going to square. So we end up with x equals the 4 that we had guessed just previously.